Okay, I like this little blurb at the beginning. This is a work of fiction set in our time. Some of the characters are based on actual persons, though names have been changed. Others are the creations of the storyteller. The author is not entirely sure which are which. And then the first little epigram is, "Everything is burning, Prince Siddhartha Gautama, the Lord Buddha." In the prologue, "I had a friend who was a spy," it begins. Jared Osborne lay in a hospital bed under a sanitary tent in the District of Columbia on Labor Day 2001. He had been dosed. No one knew how, nor when he collapsed in the DuPont Circle subway station in August, who he was. He was sometimes comatose, suspended between life and death. The circumstances that brought him to that bed beggar belief. That was my first reaction to this story. The job of a spy is to discover secrets, to find out their meaning, and to deliver their messages. Names contain messages. I'm sure Jared used many of them, but I knew him when he was just Jared Osborne. Osborne means God-born. Jared was certainly a messenger, but from the gods, you decide. Osborne had come in from the cold, but he was not a Jean Le Carré nor Graham Greene spy. He was a redeemed Marxist revolutionary. His youth, like that of the young Karl Marx himself, was lived in the dimensions of poetry and love and nature. He was a romantic. He was also a brilliant linguist who spoke and wrote 7 languages, a communist environmentalist with a PhD in horticulture, and he had worked as His Majesty's gardener for grapes and olives for the King of Saudi Arabia. From the time he was in graduate school at Texas A&M in the late 70s until about a decade before he arrived in the hospital bed, he had made mysterious forays into the Middle East and to North Africa and Latin America, on secret missions, we always thought. The circumstances that led to the bed began on those trips and with a struggle in the first gay liberation cell in Texas, founded by Osborne along with the poet Seth Denis Santos and the Austin Cabal, as we called ourselves, with all the medieval and hermetic references intended. Jared's struggle ended September 11th, 2001 in Washington, D.C., but the larger struggle continues in the world today. Jared, the operator, the linguistics dialectician and polyglot, was an amazing man, as was Seth, the poet, mystic, art historian. They were the Marxist dialectic in action, or so we all believed. "I demand that the Lord Universe grant pleasure daily to my heart," Seth said the morning they met, like a pharaoh of Egypt. And we all laughed at his audacity. All of us at the table at the UT Union's chuck wagon, Revolution Central in 1969. "Indeed," Jared responded. "Want to hear my latest poem?" Seth asked. "Dying to. It's called Asia." Apollo loved Arjuna at first sight. And did the great bowman conquer desire that night? Amen, Jared was enchanted by the young poet, he himself young. Who can know what is in another man's heart and mind, especially when he is delirious and dying? But I knew Jared. I am certain that as he died, he contemplated, as he had done most of his life every morning and early evening in his meditation practice, the symbols that gave meaning to his life, even as hallucinations. I can imagine 2 5-pointed stars joining in his head to become the circumference of a double star. They would then have become the mandala of the 5 senses. Each of the senses would have played out as images of an interior starlight, efflorescent astral flowers blooming in his brain and dying into the void. Psychedelic light shows. As he lay in the bed that Labor Day, one of the heroes of his dreams came to act out a role in this romance with death. Osborne hallucinated a lecture he and I and Seth Santos had attended in January 1974. Other Austin luminaries were there as well, including the Black Rose of Havana, Pristine Condition, and Jeffrey Del Rio, Miss Thing, Miss Mess, and La Divina, respectively. The talk was given by a little Scot named Jan Lascelles Lancer, a graduate of St. Andrews and a crazy PhD candidate in the famous University of Texas Classics Department of the late 60s, early 70s. The Scotsman was a renowned Greco-Latinist. He was also an avid homosexual and a part-time schizophrenic. The lecture was informal. The colloquy, the idea of humanism, sponsored by the classics department, allowed wide latitude in its topics. In Osborne's hallucinations, Jan Lasso's Lancer appeared as he had that cold night in 1974. He was balding with a fringe of bright red hair and side whiskers beneath large ears, which supported a pair of heavy horn rims. He might have been a shabby leprechaun. The Jerusalem heresies, Lancer began, the lecture for the 10,000th time in Osborne's head. The Knights Templar are the gay cult of the Crusades by evidence long and hard. After the fall of the Kingdom of Jerusalem, they brought a secret back to Europe. Like the philosophy of the Athenians before them, their secret carries the scent of the charms of the catamite. The returning Knights of St. John, the straight cult, similarly brought home the frank scent and image of the vulva of the Surfeit Odalisque out of the Levantine nighttime. Lancer raised a glass to Jared. From the pleasure and power centers of the Kingdom of the Jerusalem to Rhodes, to Malta, and to Provence, l'envoi. Osborne struggled with the vision. After the lecture at Les Amis, Austin's hippie cafe, we all got drunk to celebrate. As Seth walked in, he said, "Well, there's more to cocksucking than just sucking cock, huh, Lassells?" Osborne laughed in 2001. "Romance comes to Europe," he murmured. But Lancer and the rest had disappeared, and Osborne fell back into oblivion.
Yeah.